faithfully delivering value and interpreting the world's best books. Hi, this is Sally from Book Talks. Today, I'll interpret the book Scientific Thinking for Scientists. The direct translation of this book's title would be Science of Science or the Science of Researching Science. Specifically, modern scientific research can be viewed as a complex project involving both scientists' individual abilities and teamwork. So, optimizing research efficiency and improving scientific output quality require deep exploration and careful planning. These are exactly the key topics focused on in Science of Science. This book is precisely such a work in the science of science field. Based on extensive data, it analyzes modern research systems operations and offers suggestions to help researchers work more effectively. Whoa. Whoa. The book has two authors, Wang Dashun and Barabasi. Wang Dashun founded Northwestern University's Science of Science and Innovation Center, is an authority in this field, and was named among the 50 most influential management thinkers in 2021. Barabasi is an American Physical Society Fellow and a pioneer in network science research. He's authored bestsellers like Bursts, Linked, and The Formula. Their collaboration produced this book for scientists. Of course, even if you're not in related fields, why not give this book a read? This way, you'll definitely gain more insight into scientists' seemingly mysterious profession. This interpretation will be divided into 3 parts. First, we'll introduce today's research evaluation system. The second part focuses on individual researchers' career development. The third part mainly analyzes how to collaborate better in research teams.
Beyond these 3 main sections, the authors include a small chapter introducing emerging fields like AI and causal analysis.
But this content is brief. If you want more, check out previous book interpretations, like Why and the Future of Humanity, etc. All right, let's begin today's interpretation. In part 1, we'll explore how today's research system evaluates work and scholars. The key word here is papers. If you're not in academia yourself, you might not truly grasp how crucial papers are for researchers. Of course, patents, books, research reports, and such can be seen as a broader form of papers presenting scientific findings with text and charts. But our discussion below will mainly focus on papers published in academic journals. Here, it's key to note that academic journals are quite different from regular popular magazines, because articles in academic journals undergo rigorous peer review, where if you submit a paper, the editor sends it to experts in the field or a review committee to assess its novelty and significance, and they decide if it can be published in that journal. So, every paper in a reputable academic journal has been thoroughly vetted. In academia, these papers are like hard currency, highly valued and accepted. A research finding only gains recognition in the academic community when published as a paper. If we think of research as a job, scientists are employees, and their main output is papers. So, how do we evaluate the quality of such intellectual products like papers? The most objective metric is the citation count of the paper. Citations mean that in a formal paper, the author lists all the previous studies they referenced. For example, you publish a paper claiming you invented a braised pork recipe, with one step involving cutting meat into specific sized pieces. Here, you don't detail everything. Just note that the cutting method refers to Chef Wang's paper from some year. This design helps authors keep descriptions concise and makes it easy for readers to find sources. Nowadays, citations also serve a new purpose: measuring a paper's scientific impact. Actually, the concept of influence is quite subtle. Saying something or someone has influence often feels subjective, but with citation counts, we can quantitatively analyze a paper's influence. So roughly how many citations can an excellent paper typically get? In 2014, someone compiled statistics from over 9,000 academic journals since 1900, finding a total of 58 million papers. If we only printed the first page of these papers and stacked them up, the thickness would be equivalent to Africa's highest peak. Mount Kilimanjaro is nearly 6,000 meters high. If we organize these printed pages by the citation count of each paper, with the most cited on top and descending downwards, then in the bottom 2,500 meters, there would be papers that have never been cited. And in the top 1.5 meters, these papers have been cited at least 1,000 times. At the very top 1.5 centimeters of this mountain peak are papers cited over 10,000 times, including some of the most important scientific discoveries in history. And so, for example, the fourth most cited paper describes a DNA sequencing method. The author of this paper, Sanger, won the 1980 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for this contribution. So, what kind of papers get more citations? But first, the authors believe that analysis can be done from two dimensions. First, the quality of the paper itself. The authors say there are two types of papers that are particularly likely to get many citations. One is highly groundbreaking theories.
This kind of paper reports astonishing discoveries that completely transform the current academic landscape.
For example, Einstein's theory of relativity overturned Newton's classical mechanics. The other type is clear theoretical explanations that resolve long-standing confusions in a research field. For instance, three scholars authored a paper proposing the BCS theory to explain superconductivity. This theory is concise, yet solved a series of perplexing problems in the field. Soon, people started citing this theory to explain their own experimental phenomena. This paper became a classic in the field of superconductivity. Additionally, from a temporal dimension, citations vary greatly among different papers. For example, the earlier a paper is published, the more citations it tends to get.
The first papers in a field have a greater chance to accumulate citations and form what's called the first mover advantage compared to later papers.
Moreover, the longer a paper exists, the more likely it is to be read and gradually become a classic in its field. So, therefore, papers with high citation counts often represent more important, cutting-edge, and classic scientific achievements. Therefore, academia has gradually built a quantifiable evaluation system for scientific achievements centered around citation counts. Note, so within this system, how do we evaluate a scientist's achievements? Some readers might say, look at their published papers. Indeed, many have lots. Great scientists are remarkably prolific. Einstein published 248 papers. Wynne published 119, but some important scholars published extremely few papers in their lifetime. For example, Peter Higgs had very few publications. This great physicist won the 2012 Nobel Prize for predicting the Higgs boson, yet he only published 25 papers. The father of genetics, Mendel, authored just 7 papers. Thus, the absolute number of papers isn't actually that important. Later, scholar Jorge Hirsch proposed the H-index method, combining publication count with citations to comprehensively evaluate a scientist's influence. A researcher's H-index means they have H papers each cited at least H times. For example, an H-index of 20 indicates 20 papers with at least 20 citations each. Hirsch estimated that after 20 years in research, an H-index of 20 signifies success. 40 indicates eminence.
Those reaching 60 are likely top-tier scientists found only at elite institutions.
It's estimated that American Physical Society fellows typically have H-indexes above 45. Einstein's H-index was 118. Remarkably high. Clearly, one needs many high-quality papers to achieve a good H-index. Thus, this index accurately reflects a scholar's academic contributions. The H-index gained widespread attention immediately after its introduction. It's now applied in many areas, evaluating job candidates for academic positions, and even as a key reference in research funding approvals.
Of course, the book's authors emphasize that we absolutely cannot measure a scientist's contribution by just one number.
After all, Nobel laureate Higgs has an H-index of only 9. Thus, we've established an evaluation system in scientific research based on paper citations, H-index, and similar metrics. While this system has flaws, it's undeniably an effective quantitative framework. So, within this evaluation system, how should researchers plan their careers? This leads us to the second part of our interpretation. Suppose a young man named Zhang Song decides to dedicate his life to research. What would his career path generally look like? In Zhang Song's early career, roughly ages 18 to 30, he's unlikely to achieve much because during this period he must complete extensive education and training, bachelor's, master's, PhD, to truly enter the field. Einstein once said, if someone hasn't achieved their greatest scientific accomplishment by 30, they never will. Because in his era, Nobel laureates were younger on average, with 1/5 receiving the honor before 30. The youngest Nobel laureate is British physicist Lawrence Bragg, who won at just 25. However, the age for major breakthroughs in today's academia is gradually increasing. Today, an average physics researcher at 25 might just be starting their PhD. After Zhang San completes basic training and enters a research institute, he'll gradually enter a productive period.
A prolific phase.
Someone once spent 30 years systematically studying the relationship between age and creative work. The pattern found. In any creative field, a person's best work often appears between ages 30 and 40. For example, between 1980 and 2010, the NIH funded 96 scholars who later won Nobel Prizes. Their average age when making these award-winning achievements was 41. Once Zhang San passes this prolific period, his chances of making major research breakthroughs gradually decline. For scholars over 40, the challenge isn't lack of creativity, but taking on family responsibilities or management roles. Generally, scientists in this age group need to devote significant energy to grant applications, lab management, or attending various project review meetings. So, from a data perspective, Zhang San may only have about 10 years to make major breakthroughs. This is the typical reality for today's researchers. So the question is, how can Zhang San reach career heights in such a short time? Or more plainly, how to publish more influential papers? The book's authors offer these suggestions. First, researchers must balance innovation and tradition when conceptualizing projects. When discussing innovation, some might think it must be disruptive, requiring unprecedented ideas. But actually, most innovation comes from synthesizing existing knowledge into original concepts. For example, your smartphone just combines existing components: processors, memory chips, internet access, and lightweight batteries. The authors propose that by deconstructing innovation into combinations of existing knowledge, we can quantify research innovation. Analysis shows if a paper cites research from two different fields, it likely proposes a novel combination. For instance, a 2001 paper proposed analyzing an antipsychotic drug's effects through molecular biology, genes, and proteins. Its references included papers from both genetics and clinical psychiatry, a classic innovative combination, whereas a paper only citing and cited by a single field's literature likely reflects mainstream thinking within that domain. Evidence from data analysis shows unusual combinations in papers or patents do increase the likelihood of high-impact research. However, novel ideas also carry higher uncertainty. After analyzing over 17,000 patents, researchers found patents with greater diversity in collaborators' expertise were more likely to produce breakthroughs, but also more likely to fail. If a paper's references include novel journal combinations, it's more likely to be in the top 1% cited papers in its field. But they also carry greater risks. It takes longer to start accumulating citations, and many might not get any attention at all. And therefore, the authors suggest scholars balance innovation and tradition when planning research topics. For example, when Darwin wrote On the Origin of Species, he described dog, cattle, and bird breeding in the first chapter, widely accepted traditional knowledge. Someone analyzed 17.9 million papers and found that papers combining innovation with traditional research have at least twice the success rate compared to ordinary ones, and papers are explaining. These results show that combining innovation with familiar traditional ideas makes it particularly influential.
Besides balancing innovation, the authors advise researchers to accumulate academic reputation as much as possible.
There's a story about scientist Rayleigh, a leading physicist of his time, with several natural laws named after him. In 1886, Rayleigh submitted a paper on electrodynamics to the British Association for the Advancement of Science, but it was quickly rejected.
The reason given was the paper didn't meet journal standards, but the association soon changed its mind.
Because Rayleigh's signature was accidentally omitted in the first submission. When reviewers realized it was his work, they accepted it immediately and apologized. This little story reflects an important mechanism in science: the role of academic reputation. Simply put, if you're an established scholar, your research is more likely to be published and cited. Not just well-known scholars, but even institutions benefit from this reputation advantage. Someone once conducted a real experiment.
In a computer science paper collection, submitters were randomly split. One group with author info hidden, the other revealed. Papers were sent to committees for evaluation.
The result was that for authors from top universities, once their affiliation was known to reviewers, paper acceptance probability increased by 58%. Additionally, authors from prestigious institutions like Google or Microsoft saw their paper acceptance rates more than double. So, to summarize this section, for individuals pursuing research careers, their most productive period typically occurs during mid-career, ages 30 to 40. To achieve greater impact, researchers must balance innovation with tradition. They should build academic reputation and collaborate with renowned scholars and institutions to amplify their work's influence. Since collaboration was mentioned, let's naturally transition to the book's third section. Here, the authors analyze how teamwork impacts scientific research. First, let's examine the current state of teamwork in research. When we think of scientists, names like Newton, Einstein, and Darwin come to mind. Individuals who expanded human knowledge almost single-handedly. But modern research is no longer a stage for lone heroes. It requires team collaboration for major breakthroughs. The most striking example is arguably physics' most sensational recent achievement: the detection of gravitational waves. In September 2015, LIGO in the US recorded a faint signal. This signal indicated a collision of two black holes in deep space. The resulting gravitational waves traveled 1.3 billion years before reaching Earth, creating an extremely subtle vibration in detectors. Gravitational wave research is among 21st century physics' most significant pursuits. An international team spent 40 years building the $1.01 apparatus to capture this signal. The breakthrough paper listed over 1,000 authors worldwide: physicists, engineers, even administrators. How dominant has teamwork become in 21st century research? One study analyzed author counts across nearly 20 million papers, revealing a clear trend toward teamwork. For example, in 1955, almost half of science and engineering papers were authored by a single person. But by 2000, single author papers decreased dramatically, while team-authored papers accounted for 80%. Additionally, teamwork secures research funding. A survey of over 2,000 Stanford faculty found collaborative approaches secured more projects and funding. Why has teamwork become so dominant in science? The primary reason is increasing specialization of knowledge domains. As human knowledge expands exponentially, no one can master all disciplines. Thus, scientists specialize in specific areas to reach academic frontiers. But solving modern scientific complexities requires integrating diverse expertise. Simply put, only teamwork can mobilize resources for major endeavors. Today's experimental tools for frontier research demand unprecedented scale and precision, like CERN's Large Hadron Collider, requiring collaboration from 10,000 plus scientists across 100 plus countries. Scientists don't just prefer collaboration, they require it. Given teamwork's dominance, how should we select members and determine team size? First, is more elite talent always better? Actually, no. The authors cite zoologist Muir's experiment optimizing hen groups for egg production. He designed two coop types. First, selecting the most productive whole coops. Individual hens weren't top performers, but collective output was strong.
This was the high output group.
Second, gathering the highest producing hens from various coops into a super hen group. Which group prevailed? Following standard zoological protocol, Muir bred both groups for 6 generations and measured offspring egg production. The results showed that after 6 generations, the high output group hens were healthy and plump, with increasing egg production each generation.
Meanwhile, the super hen group's offspring, after 6 generations, their numbers plummeted from 9 to 3. Others killed by cage mates, with survivors sickly and scarred from fights.
In this high-stress environment, they could barely lay eggs.
This zoology experiment offers insights for team building and management. We often mistakenly think successful teams require recruiting the best of the best, but it's not that simple. Like cooking, you can't just throw all premium ingredients into a pot. In academia, Duke University's English department in the late 1980s assembled an all-star team. To boost prestige, Duke invested heavily to create this dream team. New hires included Modern Language Association presidents, international award winners, and field pioneers. Duke's English department briefly became an academic celebrity hub with immediate effects. Within years, graduate applications quadrupled. An external review committee praised it as the university's intellectual engine, but things soon changed. Just 6 years later, when the committee returned, they found a fragmented department. Renowned professors had left for other schools, moved to administrative roles, or quit academia.
Scholar Jane Tompkins even left to become a chef at a local restaurant.
This once celebrated research team dissolved dramatically. Psychologists describe Duke's case as the too many talent effect. Elite teams often battle for dominance. Such teams typically underperform. To build a successful research team, you need not only exceptionally talented geniuses, but also to choose suitable members to achieve a proper balance in personality traits. So, therefore, diversity among members is extremely important. Research shows that even just having members from different ethnic groups in research teams can boost the impact of scientific achievements by over 10%. While ensuring diversity, how should we set the team size? Is it better to have a larger team or a smaller one? To answer this question, the authors propose an approach by categorizing types of research achievements. Research achievements can generally be divided into 2 types. One that solves existing scientific problems, called developmental achievements. These achievements build on past research and deepen understanding of existing issues. Therefore, they're often cited alongside earlier studies.
The other type is disruptive achievements.
These represent a break from previous understanding. So, when papers of these achievements are cited, they might not appear alongside literature from pioneers. Following this approach, the book's author's research team classified papers from the past 60 years, scored them on developmental and disruptive aspects based on criteria, and, by comparing outputs of different team types, discovered patterns. TFRE. First, it's undeniable that papers and patents from larger teams have much higher impact than small teams. After all, large teams can pool resources for big tasks. They often have cutting-edge equipment and ample funding, driving technological progress as the main force. But interestingly, for each new member added, the disruptiveness of team achievements drops significantly. Specifically, when members grow from 1 to 50, the disruptiveness of research achievements falls by 50 percentage points. From data analysis, small teams have their own strengths. They're more flexible. Such teams can quickly validate the latest ideas or most disruptive concepts. So, to summarize team size impact in one sentence, large teams develop science, small teams disrupt science. Let's review this part of the content. First, teamwork is an unstoppable trend in research, driven by increasing specialization of knowledge and the need to pool resources for tackling tough scientific challenges. Section 8. In team building, prioritize diverse member composition. Moreover, different team sizes yield distinct research focuses and output characteristics. But for the broader scientific community, both small and large teams play crucial roles. Overall, through data analysis, the authors meticulously unravel academia's evaluation systems and operational rules. They foresee an increasingly symbiotic relationship between science and science of science. Science of science will help scientists better plan careers, leverage team strengths, and creatively explore the unknown, yielding research with greater societal value. Well, all right, scientific thinking for scientists. That concludes our interpretation of this book. Reading notes are below the audio. We'll see you next time.